This is an international alignment. When you see constructivist, that's the philosophy of all those programs, which are extremely rigorous while at the same time being constructivist and encouraging a student-centered approach and encouraging that exploration and application of knowledge, not just the rote memorization of facts. So there's several reasons to use projects. I'm going kind of fast with this time period. They're personal. We already had that. They get to direct this project in a certain direction. They get to make some choices. We give them some autonomy. And everybody in here probably likes to make some choices for themselves. Students are the same way. It creates a greater investment. And there's plenty of research on that I will explain. They're rigorous. Projects should never be the easy way out. Projects should be rigorous. Don't give it to them just so they have something to stay busy for the next few weeks. Then it wasn't a well-designed project. You need to have goals in advance and explain to the student. They're reflective because everything is done in advance, this backward planning. I know the goal to achieve. I know the standards and the different levels. They allow reflection because when that grade comes out, it was objective. Anybody in the class should have been able to give that same grade for that same project because of it being objective, and you can reflect what was done well, what needs to improve to move to the next level. They demonstrate life skills and build the arc. The arc, this is something else. It's a motivation theory. It's called self-determination theory that relates to that. We'll see at the end. So how can we really make them personal? Okay, every project. Sometimes you have something you want to do for the whole class. Now, in economics, you have this personal finance project, which is relating some math skills and planning skills, problem-solving skills in their real life and making some choices. And there are limits. So we can be interdisciplinary in that. We would think that if you make an assignment, you are making it personal, saying, okay, they have to do it. It's their personal requirement, but that doesn't make it personal to the student. It needs to matter to the student themselves. That takes time on your part to figure out how you're going to relate this to what they need in their lives. Hearing because I said so, if you think back when you were a teenager, that was never the response that was getting you motivated to do the work. It might have gotten it done. It might have been you have to get a B in this because your parents said so and you get it done, but then it just kind of gets dismissed. We're not creating lifelong learners, we're not creating motivated learners, and you're not creating skills that are retained across a lifetime. And that is what projects are designed to do. That's what they should be designed to do, is develop that skill. So you get to, in a project, let them reflect some personality. A research paper, an essay, a multiple choice test, what is personal in that environment that's going to get a student to really dig in consistently? Generally, not very much. There is, but you can use a research paper as a project if there's some control in what topic they're selecting. You can still demonstrate that skill. Written communication is a vital skill. When colleges are looking at students, written and verbal communication, those are highly emphasized. Those are what lead to that high level of achievement in life and success. So you can do that. With the project, you also get to see their genuine interests, which lets you make another connection with the student. Because just knowing a name, that helps, but if you know more about their interest, now there's more of a connection with the student. They care more about what you think. I mean, these aren't revolutionary concepts, but the fact that you can use a project to gain this knowledge and create that connection is important. Most students, if they're well designed again, if you give them some control and you let them display some personality and let them show their interests, they're going to find it fun because it's what they want to do. You have more fun when you choose to do something than when you have to do something. And that's where projects can really make a difference. And then you're setting up the guidelines in advance, not as you go with the project. Very important that it's done in advance, so you guide this project. You lay out the guidelines and you guide them in the completion and the development of the skills. But the students actually get to select all those details. They're going to show their abilities. You're going to scaffold it. So rigorous, they're not always going to be easy. That gets to be a common thought, depending on where your students come from. They had a project, oh, I make a little poster, my teacher gives me an A, I'm done, it took me an hour. Well, then the criteria of what needs to be included in the poster and how it's presented probably was sloppy or not well defined. And that's where the planning again comes from the teacher. So you need to create that rubric. I love 0 to 8 rubrics because the 0 is basically saying they didn't even do the work. A 1 to 2, that's a very low level of performance. It's rudimentary, but there's still a difference. And we can move it up. And then what do we get? An easy translation on that ABC scale. That we can start to see a difference between a high and a low. That getting a 3 out of 8, 37%, well, that's a C. That's kind of average, mediocre. It's not a high level of performance, but if we translate it into the grade that students understand, it's passing. But it allows you more flexibility because we end up with such a small range in those passing grades and a large range in the failing grades. There's a bigger difference between an F that's a 55 and an F that's a 20 than an A that's a 95 and an A that's a 98. But the grade hasn't changed. A rubric allows you to more clearly differentiate those levels of performance by identifying in advance what skills need to be demonstrated and how. Those rubrics, they give evidence because it provides the scaffolding and the guidance. It's objective. We don't want subjective performance. I wasn't in a good mood that morning, so I gave bad grades on the rubric. Either the criteria are met or they're not. Designing a rubric is probably the hardest part of the project because you need to know in advance what you're assessing. And very clearly stated, it gives their developmental abilities a chance. It gives repeated practice because they can see, I didn't attain this level, I can try it again to get to the next level and keep going through. Repeated practice is highly demonstrated, and distributed practice, these are the most effective ways of retaining information, to repeat a process and to do it over time. Projects allow this because you don't do a project in 2 days. You do it over weeks or months, which allows repetition and distribution. It's not immediate and then forgotten. It has to be brought back into the mind from the memory repeatedly, and that will generate more retention of this information and the skills. And that's really what it should be about. We reflect. Those rubrics, they allow that reflection because we can see, I gave you a 5 on this skill. Why did you achieve a 5, and what would you have to do to get up to the next level? So you can reflect on what was successful to get to that level and what is still kind of weak to move up to the next one. So I like to use the rubrics because then I have the students assess themselves and assess others and find out if we're on the same page. Because if they're not able to grade it the way you are, we have some miscommunication happening. And that's probably the biggest problem in a classroom is miscommunication of the expectations. The rubric being laid out and other people assessing can eliminate that problem, and now that sense of fairness that students want exists. Okay. So, and again, rubrics give that positive feedback because it's showing them a strength. It's not saying you failed, it's saying these are strong areas, these are areas of improvement. It's not failure, it's not you can't do it, we're just at a low level of achievement here. We want to get to a high level of achievement, but either way it's still an achievement. So we get to have a positive focus. That's kind of an area of emphasis in the education research now. We also get the life skills, all kinds of life skills. Verbal, written communication, goal setting, creativity. Okay. It goes on. They have to do research. You can't do a project without doing some research. You can't, they have to persevere. Sometimes there's going to be challenges. Collaboration. It's excellent to create projects for a group, They have to balance their time, and they have to spread it out appropriately. A project that takes 2 months, there's a lot of steps to it. It can't be done in one day. It can't be done in one night. That will be evident and reflected in that rubric grade, that all of the criteria weren't met for a high level of achievement. It's going to be a lower level. Okay? They need to plan and prioritize that whole planning process with the students. You have to go through it to create a good project first. Help the students plan their process, create a schedule. A lot of them, teenagers, they're not there. This week is what they're thinking about, not this semester or this quarter, and projects can be that big. So it becomes a challenge. The art, this is probably the key, and I use electricity there because it really is about empowering students and creating some more power for them. Okay. It's internalized motivation. That's the most successful people, the highest levels of achievement in any field, and there are decades of research on this. Highest levels are with the highest levels of internal motivation. So when you give them autonomy in a project, you relate what skills are being learned in that project, because it really is identifying those skills. You relate those skills into the student's current life,